The night the rain fell hardest was the night her life changed forever. Elena sat by the window, her hands resting on the curve of her belly, whispering soft promises to the child who hadn't yet opened her eyes to the world. She believed her future was secure, her love unshakable, her family unbreakable. But fate has its way of testing the strongest hearts. That evening, when Daniel stepped through the door with eyes colder than the storm outside, she felt the ground slip beneath her. His words were brief, sharp, and final, leaving her with nothing but silence echoing in the rooms they once dreamed in. She could have crumbled. Anyone would have. Yet, as the rain traced lines down the glass, Elena placed her palm on her stomach and whispered, "You are my reason now." She was not just left alone. She was given a choice: surrender to the pain or rise from it. She chose to rise. With every tear she held back, a spark of determination lit inside her. She refused to let her unborn child grow up in the shadow of abandonment. That night, what began as heartbreak transformed into a vow. A vow that she would give her daughter a life filled with dignity, love, and strength. The world outside raged with thunder, but inside her chest a fire had been lit, one that no storm could put out. And as she closed her eyes, Elena knew this was not the end of her story. It was only the beginning. Morning always came too quickly, dragging Elena from restless sleep into the weight of reality. The apartment was quiet, too quiet for a woman carrying a new life inside her. Bills piled up on the counter, unanswered calls from landlords and creditors echoed in her mind, and yet she refused to let despair be the first thing her child would inherit. She tied back her hair, slipped on worn shoes, and walked into a world that no longer felt welcoming. Day after day, she worked anywhere that would allow her, cleaning offices at dawn, serving coffee with a practiced smile, sketching small designs late into the night to earn a little extra. Exhaustion became her closest companion, but so did resolve. There were moments when loneliness pressed against her like a heavy curtain, whispering that she wasn't enough, that she couldn't make it. But then, her hand would brush against the swell of her stomach, and the faint flutter within reminded her why she endured. She spoke to her unborn daughter in the quiet hours, telling her stories of the future they would build together, painting pictures of sunlit mornings and laughter filling their home. People who passed her on the street only saw a tired young woman, but inside she carried an unshakable determination. Each struggle was not the end of her journey, but a step toward the life she promised. The world thought she had been left with nothing, but Elena was slowly discovering that within her, she carried everything she needed. The night her daughter was born, Elena felt both the deepest pain and the purest joy she had ever known. Holding the tiny bundle against her chest, she whispered promises into the baby's ear, promises of safety, of love, of a life built on strength. She named her Lila, a name that felt like springtime after a long winter. From that moment on, Elena no longer fought for herself. She fought for the little soul who looked at her with trusting eyes. Every sleepless night, every aching muscle, every sacrifice was no longer a burden, but a step forward. The first months were the hardest. Elena balanced bottles and bills, lullabies and long shifts, her world spinning between exhaustion and determination. There were nights she stared at the ceiling, fear pressing heavy against her chest, wondering how she could possibly give her daughter the life she deserved. But each morning, when Lila's small fingers curled around her own, Elena found new strength. She discovered skills she never believed she had, learning to sew, to design, to sell small creations at the local market. What began as a way to keep herself afloat soon sparked into something bigger, a vision. Every rejection she faced, every door closed in her face, became fuel for her drive. The more the world doubted her, the more fiercely she believed in herself. Slowly, people began to notice her work, to admire the quiet elegance she poured into every detail. Elena no longer felt like a woman abandoned. She felt like a woman reborn. What had started in heartbreak was turning into the foundation of something unshakable. And though she didn't yet see the full picture, destiny was quietly unfolding. 5 years passed like pages in a book Elena never imagined she could write. What once was a life of survival had slowly blossomed into something greater. The late nights of sketching by candlelight, the countless rejections, the small victories at weekend markets, each moment had stacked into a foundation stronger than she realized. Her designs, once overlooked, began to catch attention. A boutique shop reached out, then another, and soon her work was displayed in windows she used to walk past with quiet envy. Now she walked by with her daughter's hand in hers, both of them smiling at the proof of how far they had come. Lila had grown into a bright-eyed child, full of questions and laughter, her presence a daily reminder of why Elena had never given up. While the world once defined Elena by the man who left her, now they spoke her name with respect. She had transformed struggle into a thriving business, resilience into recognition. Clients admired not only her creations but the quiet strength that seemed to radiate from her. She was no longer the woman abandoned in the rain. She was a woman who had turned storms into stepping stones. Yet even in her success, there was an emptiness she carried like a shadow. She had built everything without bitterness, but the past still lingered in unspoken corners of her heart. She often wondered if destiny ever circled back, if the people who doubted her ever saw what she had become. Elena didn't chase those answers. Life was too full to look backward. But fate, as it often does, had its own timing. And the day was coming when the past she thought closed forever would walk back into her world. It happened on an afternoon Elena would never forget. She was at a charity event, invited as a guest speaker to share her journey of resilience and hope. The room was filled with polished suits, bright lights, and the hum of important conversations. Elena stood tall, wearing the confidence she had earned through every sleepless night and every sacrifice. Lila, now 5, sat in the front row, her curious eyes watching her mother with pride. As Elena spoke about courage, about finding strength when the world seems determined to break you, she noticed a familiar presence enter the hall. For a moment her voice almost faltered, but she quickly steadied herself. Daniel, the man who had walked away when she needed him most. His tailored suit and commanding presence looked the same, but something in his eyes was different. Less certain, more searching. He hadn't expected to see her not like this. He had left her believing she would crumble, yet here she was, standing under the spotlight, admired and respected. His gaze fell on Lila, who was laughing softly at something another child whispered. The resemblance was undeniable. His breath caught as realization dawned. This little girl was his daughter. The world seemed to freeze in that instant. Memories of the past collided with the reality before him. Elena, radiant with strength, and the child he had never known existed. For the first time in years, he felt small, like a man confronted not only by the consequences of his choices, but by the life he had missed. Elena, however, didn't waver. She finished her speech with the same grace she had shown in her life. Unbroken, unbowed, and more powerful than he ever imagined. The moment he had thought would never come had arrived, but it was she who now held the power of what came next. The applause faded, but the tension in the room lingered. Elena stepped down from the stage, her heart steady, her hand reaching for Lila's. The little girl clutched her mother's fingers and smiled, oblivious to the storm of emotions unfolding across the room. Daniel stood near the exit, his gaze fixed on them, as if the ground beneath him had vanished. For years he had lived believing he had moved on, but nothing could have prepared him for the sight of a daughter who mirrored his smile, and a woman who no longer needed his name to shine. When their eyes met, time seemed to fold. He wanted to speak, to explain, to apologize, but words abandoned him. Elena's expression held no anger, only a calm strength that unsettled him more than fury ever could. She walked toward him with dignity, her daughter's hand in hers, her posture straight, her presence commanding. Daniel whispered her name, but it sounded hollow, a memory of a life that no longer belonged to him. Elena paused in front of him, her voice steady, almost gentle. She introduced Lila, not as his daughter, but as her pride, her joy, her reason for never surrendering. In that moment, Daniel realized the truth. He had abandoned what could have been his greatest blessing. He saw the life Elena had built without him, a life richer than anything his power or wealth could buy. The regret in his eyes was heavy, but Elena carried no bitterness. She had already won the battle long ago, not against him, but against despair. With one last look, she turned away, leading Lila toward the doors, the future wide open before them. Daniel was left standing in silence, haunted not by her absence, but by the undeniable truth. She had found strength without him, and that strength was something he could never take away. The story was no longer his to shape. It belonged to Elena and the daughter who had given her wings.